M5D UFO Files. Unraveling the UFO Files. Revelations that change everything.
The views and opinions expressed by individuals in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of the broadcaster or its parent company or affiliates.
You are now listening to M5D UFO Files, unraveling the secrets of aerial phenomena. Subscribe now and dive deep into the unexplained with M5D UFO Files. Welcome, troop seekers, to another deep dive into the unexplained. I'm your host, and with me, as always, is our brilliant expert, ready to navigate the uncharted skies of information.
It's great to be back, and today, we're embarking on a pretty monumental journey through the world of unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAPs, as they're now commonly called.
Right, UAPs.
And our sources for this deep dive, they're really quite extraordinary. We spent hours, seriously, hours, meticulously sifting through testimony from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast.
But this isn't just random chatter, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
This isn't just, speculative stories or internet rumors floating around. We're talking about direct, first-hand accounts.
From some heavy hitters.
Exactly. Decorated military pilots, we've got NASA physicists in the mix, high-level intelligence whistleblowers, even billionaires who've put their own money, serious money, into researching this very field. These are the very people who saw something they couldn't explain. Something that just defied conventional physics, defied known human capabilities. And their narratives, when you put them all together, they paint a picture that frankly demands serious, objective consideration from all of us.
So our mission then, should you choose to accept it,
I always want to say that,
is to try and extract the most compelling nuggets of knowledge from these diverse and sometimes conflicting accounts.
which they often are.
Definitely. We want to connect the seemingly disparate dots, give you a shortcut to being truly well-informed on this topic.
Cut through the noise.
Exactly. Forget the flimsy narratives, the whispered rumors, the grainy photos you can't make out. We're going straight to the sources we have here, uncovering surprising facts and asking the questions that really matter.
Because, let's be honest, if what these individuals are claiming is true, even a fraction of it, it doesn't just add a new chapter to our history books. It fundamentally changes everything we thought we knew about our world, our technology, our place in the universe, maybe even our very origins. It's that big.
Okay, so what are we getting into today specifically?
Well, we'll unpack the highly controversial claims of a man who says he actually reverse-engineered alien technology, tech powered by an exotic element.
I think I know what you mean.
We'll hear chilling first-hand accounts from military aviators, Top Guns, talking about objects defying every known law of physics.
The kind of stuff that keeps pilots up at night.
You bet. We'll delve into global encounters, some involving apparent telepathic communication with, beings.
Telepathic, wow.
And we'll explore the deep-seated, multi-decade government secrecy that has shrouded this whole phenomenon for generations.
The infamous cover-up.
Yeah. So buckle up, because here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, let's dive right in then. We have to start with maybe one of the most polarizing figures in UFO lore, Bob Lazar.
Oh yeah, Lazar, his name alone. It just ignites furious debate among skeptics or, almost reverent belief among followers. He's been central to this conversation for decades.
Absolutely. But what happens when someone like Chris Mellon, and for context, this is a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, weighs in on Lazar's claims?
Right. You'd expect, logically, a swift, decisive dismissal, wouldn't you? From someone that high up in the Pentagon, someone whose job was intelligence, secrets, debunking fringe stuff.
Standard operating procedure, you think?
Exactly. And that's what makes Mellon's interview so fascinating and, frankly, so telling. He doesn't just dismiss it. He walks this incredible tightrope between, outright disbelief and this cautious, almost hesitant maybe. So he acknowledges a friend's claim, apparently someone he trusts, that Lazar was merely a radiation badge checker at Los Alamos.
That's a discrediting tactic, right? Minimize the role, sow doubt.
Yeah, paint him as just some low-level guy who wouldn't know anything. But Mellon couldn't dismiss Lazar wholesale, even with that. What truly seemed to pique his curiosity, what he kept coming back to, was Lazar's consistent complexity and, crucially, his specific mention of element 115.
The famous element 115. Unpentium or Moscovium now.
Right. And Lazar was talking about its specific properties for propulsion decades before a stable isotope was officially recognized by mainstream science. This wasn't just a lucky guess about some element existing. He was describing its function.
Which is a huge detail.
It's critical. Now, Mellon did joke about it, saying it sounded like something from Battlestar Galactica, trying to lighten it, perhaps.
A bit of deflection.
Maybe. But his tone, you could hear it, it hinted at genuine surprise, like he was trying to dismiss something that clearly stuck with him as genuinely anomalous, something that didn't quite fit the easy explanations.
They're not just laughing it off.
No. This is one of those rare moments where the government establishment, or at least a former high-ranking member, encounters the fringe, and they aren't just pointing and laughing. It raises more questions than it answers, suggests there might be a more nuanced internal debate than the public usually sees.
The fact that Mellon couldn't just wave it away,
Yeah.
that's significant.
It's profoundly unsettling to the official narrative, yeah.
And then there's Lazar's consistency, right? The plot thickens there, too.
Oh, absolutely. He's told the exact same incredibly intricate story since the late 1980s, filled with technical details, descriptions of the craft, the propulsion, and it hasn't really wavered.
Rogan pointed that out, didn't he?
He did. He said, look, some people are masterful liars, sure, but maintaining such a detailed, technically specific narrative for over 30 years without major contradictions, without evolving the story as technology changed, that's extraordinary if it's all just a fabrication.
It takes immense effort to keep a complex lie straight for that long.
Right. And then there's the Los Alamos connection. This is key. The government initially tried to deny he ever worked there. Flat out denial.
Never heard of him.
Pretty much. But then, investigative journalist George Knapp, and Knapp is a serious journalist, multiple Peabody Awards, not some fringe blogger.
Right, important distinction.
Knapp managed to dig up an employee roster, an internal phone book from Los Alamos, and boom, Lazar's name is right there, unequivocally.
Wow. So documented proof.
Documented proof contradicting the official denial. And Knapp even took Lazar back to the Los Alamos facility years later. Lazar knew the layout, pointed out specific buildings, even named people who worked there at the time. He knew his way around.
So that part holds up, his employment there.
That foundational part of his story, that he was employed at a highly classified government facility, stands up to scrutiny, which makes the denials look, well, suspicious. It adds a significant layer of credibility, or at least makes you question why they'd lie about that.
Okay, so he worked there. But what about the S4 stuff, the Area 51 connection?
Right. Lazar's alleged knowledge went way beyond just being on the payroll at Los Alamos. He claimed he knew precisely when and where they, presumably the secret program, were testing these anomalous crafts out near Area 51 at the S4 site.
And he didn't keep it to himself.
Apparently not. He actually took friends, including his wife at the time and maybe others, out to an observation point near the base to watch these alleged test flights, which, unsurprisingly, led to them getting caught and arrested by military police.
Not the smartest move if you're trying to expose a secret program.
Or maybe incredibly bold, depending on your perspective. Now, Mellon, again, trying to find a rational explanation.
Always looking for the conventional answer.
He suggests Lazar might have just picked up information at an off-base bar. You know, the kind frequented by scientists and pilots near Groom Lake, maybe overheard something.
Plausible deniability, perhaps.
It's plausible on the surface, but is it really a satisfying answer for someone who could apparently predict exact test schedules? Down to the day, the time, week after week. This wasn't just vague gossip like they might test something soon.
No, this sounds like specific, actionable intelligence.
Exactly. It's extraordinarily hard to explain that away as mere bar talk or eavesdropping. It implies a much deeper, more direct access to highly classified operational schedules, an insider's view.
Someone who knew the flight plan, essentially.
Precisely. Which is hard to reconcile with just being a radiation badge checker who overheard things in a bar.
Okay, so Mellon is intrigued but skeptical.
Yeah.
What about others? You mentioned billionaires.
Yes. Robert Bigelow, aerospace entrepreneur, founder of Bigelow Aerospace, a man who invested millions, maybe hundreds of millions, in psychic research, consciousness studies, and famously owned Skinwalker Ranch for over a decade, specifically to study anomalous phenomena there.
Right. Bigelow's deeply involved in the weirder side of science and aerospace.
Deeply. And he has openly stated on Rogan, in fact, that he wouldn't bet against the majority of Lazar's story being true.
That's a pretty strong statement from someone like Bigelow.
It's huge. He specifically cited George Knapp's extensive investigative work over the years, saying the collective information Knapp gathered was awfully damn impressive.
So he trusts Knapp's investigation.
It seems so. And this isn't just a casual endorsement. This comes from someone with vast resources, deep connections in government and scientific circles, and a profound personal, long-term interest in these phenomena. For Bigelow to lend that kind of weight to Lazar's claims, it moves them far away from the simple fringe crank dismissal.
It suggests there might be more substantiation than is publicly known.
Or at least that someone with the means to investigate deeply finds it compelling. Bigelow isn't someone easily fooled, and he has a lot of reputation to lose.
Did Bigelow share any specific anecdotes about Lazar?
He did. A hilarious one, actually. Almost sounds like a movie scene. He described going on a UFO watch with Lazar and George Knapp out near Area 51, trying to observe these alleged test flights.
Okay, the three of them out in the desert.
Exactly. And Lazar shows up with, get this, a Mylar balloon and a helium tank.
Uh-oh. What was he planning?
His audacious idea was to inflate the balloon and send it over the mountain range towards the S4 site.
Why?
To trigger their radar. He wanted to see if sending an unauthorized object into their airspace would provoke a response, maybe flush out one of the craft they were testing.
That's incredibly risky. Trespassing on military airspace with a balloon.
Extremely risky. Bigelow described his immense relief, probably mixed with a good dose of fear, when the wind suddenly picked up and blew the other way.
Phew.
Yeah, it carried the balloon north, away from the restricted area, averting a potential arrest and a very, very awkward night in jail, especially for a billionaire aerospace mogul.
Close call.
Definitely. But it highlights Lazar's character, right? This blend of scientific curiosity, audacious risk-taking, maybe a touch of mischief, but it also underlines how strongly he believed in what he claimed to have seen, the lengths he'd go to try and prove it, even if it meant provoking the most secret installation on Earth.
It's a telling anecdote, for sure. So let's get to the core of it. The technology Lazar described.
Right. This is the heart of it, what makes his claims so revolutionary and controversial. He alleged he worked on reverse engineering alien craft retrieved by the government.
Recovered saucers, essentially.
That's the gist. Stored and studied at the S4 facility near Area 51, and he claimed they were powered by this element 115.
How did he say it worked?
He described a gravity propulsion system. He said element 115 served as the fuel source. When bombarded with protons in a reactor on board the craft, it supposedly transmutes and produces gravity A waves.
Gravity waves, like the ones LIGO detects.
Not exactly. He described these as a different type, ones that could be amplified and focused by emitters on the craft. This amplified gravity wave, he claimed, effectively warps space-time around the craft.
So it's not pushing against air or expelling mass.
No, it's bending space itself, creating a distortion that pulls the destination towards the craft, or vice versa, allowing it to traverse vast distances almost instantaneously.
Making interstellar distances completely irrelevant, as he put it.
Exactly. We're not traveling through space conventionally. You're essentially contracting the space in front of you and expanding it behind you, which interestingly would mean the occupants inside wouldn't experience the crushing G-forces of extreme acceleration.
Because they're inside the bubble of warp space.
That's the idea. It's a concept straight out of theoretical physics, like the Alcubierre drive, but Lazar claimed it was actual working technology he saw and worked on.
And the craft themselves, how did he describe them?
Seamless. He said they looked like they were formed as one piece, no rivets, no joints. Back in 1989, the best analogy he had was injection molding.
Omitted by the tech terminology of the time.
Right. But later, as our own technology advanced, he updated his description. He started saying it was more like 3D printing or even nanotechnology, built from the ground up, atom by atom.
That consistency, adapting the analogy but keeping the core description, it's interesting.
It is, because his core description of a seamlessly constructed craft, potentially built atom by atom, predated our widespread understanding or capability in advanced 3D printing and nanotechnology. It adds weight to the consistency argument.
So Lazar, controversial, consistent, some parts verifiable, others dependent on his word, but backed by some intriguing circumstantial evidence and even cautious interest from figures like Mellon and Bigelow.
That sums it up pretty well. A true enigma.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so let's pivot now from the, let's say, controversial Bob Lazar and his claims of reverse engineering to someone whose credibility is, frankly, ironclad.
All right, who are we talking about?
Commander David Fravor, decorated U.S. Navy Top Gun pilot, the guy at the center of the now famous 2004 Tic Tac UAP incident off the coast of California.
Ah, the Tic Tac. That footage, those accounts, They really blew the lid off things, didn't they?
They absolutely did. Fravor isn't a whistleblower with an agenda. He's not a theorist. He's a seasoned aviator, decades of flight experience, commanded a strike fighter squadron, recognized throughout the military for exceptional skill, calm under pressure, impeccable judgment.
So when he says he saw something weird,
People listen. Even the most hardened skeptics tend to pause when Fravor speaks, because his account comes from direct professional observation, backed by rigorous training and multiple witnesses.
okay, remind us of the basics of his account. It's chilling.
It really is, and he delivers it with this incredible calm precision, just like you'd expect from an elite pilot recalling an event. He and 3 other aviators, his WSO, Weapons Systems Officer, and his FA-18F Super Hornet, and another pilot and WSO in a second Super Hornet visually observed this object.
The tic-tac.
Yeah. About 40 feet long, maybe 20 based on later estimates, smooth white tic-tac shaped. No wings, no visible exhaust plume, no rotors, nothing suggesting conventional propulsion. And they watched it with their own eyes for about 5 minutes.
5 minutes is a long time in an aerial encounter.
A lifetime. And its performance just defied physics. Radar from the USS Princeton cruiser coordinating the exercise had tracked it earlier doing impossible things, like dropping from over 80,000 feet way up there down to near sea level, maybe 50 feet in under a second.
That acceleration, it's unthinkable.
Yeah.
The G-forces.
Would turn any human pilot and any known aircraft into, well, Shelley, a fine red mist, as some have put it. It's simply not possible within our understanding of aerodynamics and material science.
So what happened when Fravor engaged it?
He decided to investigate closer. As he descended towards it, the tic-tac seemed to notice and began to mirror his movements ascending to meet him. Then, as Fravor made a move to cut across its circle, it accelerated away at a speed he couldn't comprehend. It just vanished.
Disappeared.
Gone. But here's the kicker. Almost immediately after it disappeared from Fravor's sight, the radar operators on the Princeton report that the object had reappeared at Fravor's pre-assigned rendezvous point, his CAP, Combat Air Patrol Point.
How far away was that?
60 miles.
60 miles away.
Instantly. Or at least within seconds. Faster than any known aircraft could possibly travel that distance. It was like an impossible game of cat and mouse, a clear, undeniable demonstration of capabilities far, far beyond anything humanity possesses, or even really theorizes as possible with current tech.
Anticipating his move, almost.
That's one interpretation.
Yeah.
Or just moving between points with impossible speed.
Now, you mentioned an overlap with Lazar's claims earlier.
Yes, this is where it gets really interesting, connecting these seemingly separate threads. Fravor himself, in later interviews, actually discussed Lazar's claims.
What did he say? Did he dismiss Lazar?
Quite the opposite. He stated that he found Bob Lazar to be a normal guy and explicitly said he didn't think Lazar was crazy.
That's a significant endorsement from someone like Fravor.
It's huge. A highly rational, decorated Top Gun pilot saying the most controversial figure in ufology isn't crazy, that carries weight. And Fravor even recounted asking Lazar, hypothetically, how long it might take humanity to reverse engineer the kind of technology Lazar described.
Lazar's answer.
Another 100 years.
Wow.
And think about it. This level of advanced capability described by Lazar bending time and space through gravity propulsion, it directly echoes what Fravor observed. It offers a compelling, maybe the only plausible, explanation for how the tic-tac could perform those impossible maneuvers, dropping 80,000 feet, hitting insane speeds, making instant turns, all without experiencing destructive G-forces.
Because the craft isn't moving through space-time in the normal way.
Exactly. If space-time itself is being warped around the craft, as Lazar claims his tech did, then the occupants and the structure wouldn't experience those Gs. It aligns disturbingly well. It turns Lazar's seemingly wild claims into a potential key for understanding Fravor's very real, very credible observation.
So how did the military initially react to Fravor's report back in 2004?
Well, for years, the military tended to ignore or dismiss these kinds of incidents. You know, the usual explanations, weather phenomena, pilot error, equipment malfunction, maybe even classified drone tests they couldn't talk about.
Sweep it under the rug.
Largely, yes. But the tic-tac incident, especially after the New York Times broke the story in 2017 with the declassified footage and Fravor going public, that changed things.
How so?
High-level government officials, as Fravor testified later, started taking it serious. They summoned him to Washington, D.C. twice to brief staffers on congressional committees, people in the Pentagon. They wanted to hear his story directly from him.
A definite shift in attitude.
A monumental shift. The Navy subsequently implemented new formalized UAP reporting procedures for its pilots, encouraging them to report strange sightings without fear of stigma. This wasn't just about satisfying curiosity anymore, it was a clear acknowledgement of a potential national security concern.
Unidentified objects with superior technology in sensitive airspace. Yeah, that's a concern.
You have these things operating with impunity, demonstrating capabilities we can't match or even fully understand, posing potential risks, collision hazards, surveillance threats, who knows what else that our current defense systems are completely ill-equipped to handle.
Okay, so Fravor's encounter was a watershed moment. But was it isolated?
Far from it. And this brings us to another key figure, former FA-18 pilot Ryan Graves.
Graves has been very vocal recently, too.
Extremely. His experience adds another critical layer. His squadron, operating off the east coast of the U.S., near Virginia Beach in Florida, began detecting UAPs every single day.
Every day.
Every single day. Starting in late 2013, early 2014. And what triggered it? They had just upgraded their F-18 radar systems to the new, highly advanced APG-79 ASA radar.
So better sensors started seeing things that were missed before.
That's exactly the implication. They went from what they thought was an empty, clear airspace to one that was suddenly teeming with radar contacts that behaved anomalously.
What did they think initially?
Their first thought, quite rationally, was that the brand new, multi-million-dollar radar system was broken, malfunctioning, giving false positives.
Makes sense. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Right. But then visual confirmation started pouring in. Multiple pilots started seeing these things with their own eyes, confirming the radar hits weren't just glitches. This wasn't a one-off event like the Tic Tac. It was a persistent, daily phenomenon. An entire airspace, day after day, occupied by unknown craft.
It's deeply unsettling. Did they get a good look at any of them?
One of Graves' fellow pilots had an incredibly unnerving near miss, almost collided with one of these objects.
Seriously?
Yeah, and his description is one of the strangest on record. He described it as a dark gray or black cube inside of a clear or translucent sphere.
A cube in a sphere.
Exactly. With the corners of the inner cube apparently touching the inner surface of the outer sphere. Just let that image sink in. A solid geometric shape perfectly encased within a transparent sphere.
That doesn't sound like anything. Anything remotely human-made.
Nothing we know of. Not drones, not aircraft, not weather balloons. It's a bizarre, specific configuration. And this object exhibited both stationary hovering capability and moments of high-speed movement. A profound mystery in both its form and its function.
And was this cube in a sphere a one-time sighting?
Apparently not. Graves mentioned this specific description has been reported by other witnesses in different incidents as well. It's becoming a recurring, specific signature for this type of UAP, suggesting a consistent, non-human design logic.
Okay, aside from the weird shapes, what about their flight characteristics? You mentioned impossible kinematics.
Truly impossible by our standards. Graves reported these objects remaining perfectly stationary, just hanging there, against winds blowing up to 140 miles per hour at high altitudes.
Holding position in a virtual hurricane.
Pretty much. Try to imagine anything we've created. Helicopter fighting gale force winds, a jet trying to hover, a sophisticated drone doing that without immense visible effort. Without massive fuel consumption, constant adjustments, probably loud noise. These things apparently did it effortlessly, silently.
How is that even possible?
We don't know. It implies propulsion systems or energy sources completely beyond our current engineering. Furthermore, they often flew in very efficient, programmed-looking racetrack patterns for hours on end.
Like they were surveilling something. Or just patrolling.
It suggests intelligence, an observational purpose, and an endurance far exceeding conventional aircraft. They weren't just zipping through randomly. They'd be there when the pilots took off for training missions, and they'd often still be there, flying the same patterns, when the pilots landed hours later.
A persistent, unyielding presence. Not random. Purposeful.
That's the strong implication.
So, daily sightings, near misses, objects defying physics. How was this being handled officially within the squadron or the Navy at the time?
This is where it gets problematic. Despite these daily sightings, despite the clear safety hazards, these were direct collision risks in controlled military training airspace.
A huge flight safety issue.
Absolutely. Posing a threat to multi-million-dollar jets and the lives of the pilots. But there is this pervasive stigma within the flight community.
The giggle factor.
Exactly. pilots feared serious career repercussions. They worried about losing their flight status, losing their security clearances, being grounded, or just being labeled as unreliable or unstable if they officially reported seeing a UAP.
So they just kept quiet.
Largely, yes, leading to widespread underreporting. This systemic silence, as Graves points out, meant that the military leadership, the admirals, the people in charge of strategy and safety, had an incomplete, dangerously skewed picture of what was actually happening in their own protected airspace.
They were flying blind, in a sense, to this phenomenon.
Precisely. It jeopardized national security by not addressing a potential threat, and it jeopardized the safety of their own personnel. This is exactly why Graves later founded Americans for Safe Aerospace.
To give pilots a safe channel to report.
Yes, to provide witnesses a platform and advocate for protections, encouraging open, consequence-free reporting, trying to foster a culture where this critical safety and intelligence information isn't suppressed by stigma or fear.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, has this improved? Are things still being potentially covered up?
Well, the reporting mechanisms are supposedly better now in the Navy and Air Force, but the issue of secrecy and lack of transparency persists, even at very high levels.
How so?
Congressman Matt Gaetz recently investigated a UAP incident, a more recent one, at Eglin Air Force Base in Florida.
Okay, what happened there?
According to Gaetz, a flight crew encountered multiple UAPs flying in a diamond formation. And in the center of this formation, there was a large floating orb.
An orb coordinating smaller craft.
That's how it sounds. And this orb reportedly jammed the pilot's advanced radar system and their FLIR, the forward-looking infrared camera system.
Jammed both radar and infrared. That's sophisticated interference.
Very. FLIR detects heat signatures, so jamming it suggests a technology that can either mask its heat signature incredibly effectively or actively interfere with our most advanced thermal sensors. The pilots were forced to take a manual photograph with a standard camera because their primary sensors were useless.
Did Gates get to see the photo? Or talk to the crew?
Here's the troubling part. Gaetz, along with fellow Congressman Tim Burchett, who's also been very vocal on UAPs, were initially denied full access to the complete information and even to the flight crew involved.
Sitting members of Congress denied access by the military.
Yes, it highlights this persistent, high-level government secrecy, even obstructing elected officials trying to perform their oversight duties. Gaetz eventually did see the image, and he described it as clearly non-human and completely mind-boggling. He emphasized the profound concern it raised among those who witnessed it and those, like him, who were briefed on it. It suggests the cover-up, or at least extreme compartmentalization, is still very much alive and well.
Okay, so we've heard about Lazar's controversial claims, the incredible military encounters with Fravor and Graves, but this isn't just a recent American military phenomenon, is it?
Not at all. And it's not new either. This phenomenon has historical depth and global reach. Let's travel, for instance, to Rua, Zimbabwe. The year is 1994.
Zimbabwe, okay. What happened there?
At the aerial school, nearly 100 school children, aged roughly 6 to 12, witnessed a UFO land in broad daylight in a field adjacent to their playground during recess.
100 kids saw a UFO land.
Yes. And several beings reportedly emerged from the craft. Filmmaker James Fox, who eventually made the excellent documentary The Phenomenon, which covered this.
I've seen that, yeah.
Fox initially dismissed the story when he first heard about it years earlier. He thought, no way. How could a mass landing like that happen with so many witnesses, especially children, and not be global front-page news?
A reasonable first reaction, I suppose.
Very reasonable. But years later, he, along with the highly respected late Harvard psychiatrist Dr. John Mack, who specialized in abduction phenomena and took witness testimony very seriously.
Mack was controversial, but thorough.
Extremely thorough. They investigated the aerial school incident deeply. They interviewed the children, who were by then young adults, individually. They looked at the drawings the kids made immediately after the event. And what they found was compelling consistency.
Consistency in the stories, even years later.
Remarkable consistency across dozens of independent accounts. Consistency in the descriptions of the craft, the beings, the sequence of events, and also the profound emotional impact the event clearly had on them, an impact that persisted decades later. It indicated a deeply traumatic yet very real shared experience, far beyond simple misidentification or playground fantasy.
What makes the Zimbabwe case stand out even more?
The communication aspect, this is what makes it uniquely profound. The children consistently described receiving a telepathic message from the beings.
Telepathic communication from the beings.
Yes. Not auditory speech, but thoughts, concepts, feelings directly implanted in their minds. And the message was consistent across the reports.
What was the message?
It was essentially a warning about technology, that humanity's use of technology was becoming a significant problem, that our actions were harming the planet, and that if we didn't change our ways, we were going to ruin the Earth.
A direct environmental warning.
A profound, urgent ecological message. This wasn't just a passive sighting. It was an active attempt to communicate a deep concern about our planetary future. And it was delivered specifically to children.
Why children, do you think?
Dr. Mack and others speculated. Maybe children are seen as less biased, less conditioned by societal norms, maybe more open to receiving such a message without the layers of adult skepticism or fear. Perhaps a more direct conduit for an urgent warning. The consistency of this specific message, its telepathic delivery, its emotional resonance across nearly 100 kids, it's truly remarkable. It adds this whole other layer of direct, purposeful interaction to the UAP phenomenon.
Was this the only school landing like this?
No, and that suggests a potential pattern. James Fox also mentioned a similar case in Australia back in 1966 at Westall High School near Melbourne.
Australia 66.
Roughly 300 witnesses there, students and staff, including a science teacher, saw a disc-shaped crash land briefly near the school playground. It took off again quickly, leaving ground traces. And intriguingly, photographic evidence apparently emerged 2 days prior to the actual landing event.
Photos from before it happened. That's bizarre.
Extremely bizarre. It hints at something deliberate, perhaps even orchestrated. Again, why schools? The speculation is that maybe they're seen as benign environments, less threatening than, say, a military base. Perhaps a safer way to interact or convey a message without provoking a hostile response from authorities or panicked adults. It implies a strategic, thoughtful approach to interaction, targeting environments where the message might be received more openly.
Fascinating pattern. Okay, let's jump across the globe again, back in time a bit. Rendlesham Forest.
Ah, yes, Rendlesham. December 1980, Suffolk, UK. Right next to RAF Woodbridge, a U.S. Air Force base at the time. A classic, deeply weird case.
What happened there? Military personnel involved again?
Yes. U.S. Air Force security personnel reported seeing strange lights descending into the forest just outside the base perimeter. A patrol went to investigate. They encountered something.
Well,
Reports vary slightly, but generally describe a metallic, possibly triangular craft on or near the ground emitting lights. The deputy base commander at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, even went out with a team on a subsequent night when the lights reappeared.
the deputy commander himself.
Yes, and he made an audio recording during the event and later wrote an official memo to the British Ministry of Defense confirming an encounter with an apparent UFO. His memo described objects moving at high speed, dropping molten metal-like substances, and firing beam-like lights down to the ground near the base's weapons storage area.
Weapons storage. That adds a concerning layer.
It does, and physical traces were reportedly found at the initial landing site, impressions on the ground, damage to trees, and elevated radiation readings detected by Halt's team.
So physical evidence again.
Documented physical evidence, reported officially by a high-ranking military officer. What makes it even stranger is the claim made later by one of the airmen involved in the first night's encounter, Jim Penniston.
What did he claim?
Penniston claimed he got close enough to the craft to actually touch its surface. And when he did, he says he received a massive download of information directly into his mind, telepathically.
Another telepathic communication.
Yes. He described it as binary code. Pages and pages of ones and zeros filling his mind's eye. He wrote them down in a notebook immediately afterward.
Binary code. Was it ever decoded?
Yes, years later. When decoded, the binary allegedly translated into a message containing geographical coordinates pointing to several ancient sites around the Earth, like the pyramids, Nazca Lines, a reference to the mythical island of High Brazil, and possibly even the craft's point of origin or purpose.
That's incredibly specific and bizarre.
It is. Sonny White, the NASA warp drive physicist we mentioned earlier, described the Rendlesham incident as so bizarre that it breaks all of my guessing machine. The combination of factors, the official military reports, the physical traces, the alleged telepathic binary code, the proximity to a nuclear weapons storage area, it just doesn't make any sense within our conventional framework. It suggests an alien logic or purpose that completely defies human understanding.
It sounds like something Jacques Vallée would investigate.
Absolutely. And legendary investigator Jacques Vallée, a true pioneer in modern UFO research, involved with Project Blue Book back in the day, a computer scientist, astronomer.
Vallée brings a unique perspective.
He does. He's delved deep into these historical cases that go far beyond just lights in the sky. He actually criticizes current government investigations, like the Pentagon's UAP task force, for focusing only on recent military encounters.
Why is that a criticism?
Vallée argues they're missing a huge part of the picture. They should be re-examining the detailed federal records of past incidents. Cases like Socorro, New Mexico in 1964, or Valençol, France in 1965.
What was significant about those cases?
According to Vallée, these older cases often offer much more robust data than just radar signatures or blurry FLIR videos. They involved close encounters, landings, physical traces meticulously documented at the time by multiple official agencies.
Like the Rendlesham traces.
Exactly. Vallée emphasizes that these cases, Socorro and Valençol, along with a lesser-known case near Trinity, New Mexico, site of the first atomic bomb test, they shared disturbing similarities.
What kind of similarities?
They involve landings and encounters with creatures, as Vallée puts it, that are about 3 feet tall, that breathe our air, recognize our signals, communicate with us in funny ways, often implying telepathic or nonverbal communication.
Small beings communicating.
Yes. And another chillingly consistent detail. Witnesses in these cases often reported experiencing a specific type of paralysis.
Paralysis.
Yes, a paralysis that inhibited their motor nerves, preventing them from moving or reacting, but leaving them fully conscious and aware, able to observe everything happening, almost as if they were being deliberately held in place for observation or interaction by the beings.
That's terrifying.
Deeply unsettling. And crucially, in all 3 cases, Socorro, Valençol, Trinity, physical traces were left at the sites. These weren't just vague reports. The traces were rigorously measured and documented by authorities, from local police all the way up to the FBI and scientific bodies. Ground depressions, burn marks, soil anomalies, sometimes radiation, hard evidence.
Evidence that seems to be ignored now.
Vallée argues it's sidelined in favor of recent military data, which might be technologically impressive, but often lacks the ground truth and biological elements of these older, deeply strange encounters. He also notes the profound psychological impact on the witnesses.
How so?
Witnesses often reported an almost religious feeling, a sense of existential significance after these encounters, especially those involving communication. It wasn't just seeing something weird, it was an event that fundamentally shifted their understanding of reality, suggesting a message or an interaction far beyond a simple observation. Something deeply meaningful, even if terrifying or incomprehensible.
Okay, so we have these incredible accounts, military pilots seeing physics-defying craft, historical reports of landings and beings, even claims of telepathic communication. How do actual scientists, people trained in rigorous analysis, try to make sense of all this? Let's talk about Sonny White again, the NASA warp drive physicist.
Right, Harold Sonny White. He ran NASA's Advanced Propulsion Lab, specifically looking into concepts like warp drives theoretically manipulating space-time for faster-than-light travel. So he's someone comfortable with physics concepts that border on science fiction.
How does he approach the UAP reports? Still agnostic, you said.
Yes, he maintains a scientifically cautious, agnostic stance regarding their origin or exact nature. He's not jumping to conclusions about aliens, but he's clearly intrigued by the data and the witness testimony, and he applies scientific rigor to try and understand it.
Like his theory about the Tic Tac being a projection.
Exactly. His initial hypothesis was that the Tic Tac might be an incredibly advanced volumetric display. Think sophisticated holography plasma pixels projected by lasers, maybe from satellites or drones, designed to create a convincing visual illusion.
Why would they do that?
His idea was maybe it was a form of misdirection. Create an illusion to make observers, like Fravors jets, go where they wanted them to go, or perhaps just to test our reactions or sensor capabilities. It was an ingenious attempt to find a technological explanation within the realm of physics, albeit highly advanced physics.
But that theory didn't hold up.
No. White himself noted that the description from Fravors' wingman, Commander Alex Dietrich, specifically mentioned the Tic Tac having a flat, solid-looking surface. That visual detail torpedoed his volumetric display theory. Because a projected plasma image likely wouldn't appear perfectly flat and solid, it would probably seem more diffuse, maybe slightly shimmering or translucent. Dietrich's specific observation didn't fit the hypothesis.
So he discarded his own theory based on witness data.
Yes, which is exactly what good scientists do. They test hypotheses against the available evidence, even if it forces a reevaluation and leaves them without an easy answer. His struggle to explain these phenomena, even with his cutting-edge background in theoretical propulsion, really highlights how truly anomalous these sightings are. They push the boundaries of our current scientific models.
Okay, White is cautious but intrigued. What about Hal Puthoff? You mentioned him earlier, Stanford physicist, remote viewing pioneer. He sounds less cautious.
Oh, Hal Puthoff brings a completely different, truly mind-bending perspective. He's not just intrigued, he seems deeply convinced of the reality of both UAPs and non-human intelligence, NHI.
Based on his own research.
Based on decades of involvement. Remember, he was involved in government-sponsored programs looking into this, like Robert Bigelow's AOSPTIP contract, which investigated UAPs for the DIA, and potentially other classified work, like the rumored Kona Blue program. He's had access to data and possibly materials that few others have seen.
An insider's view.
Definitely. He describes the current situation not as a lack of evidence, but as an embarrassment of riches in terms of data. Largely thanks, he says, to our vastly improved sensor systems radar, satellite imagery, infrared that can now capture phenomena clearly that were previously dismissed as anomalies or simply went undetected.
So the data's there if you have access.
That's his strong assertion, and he's explored some pretty far-out ideas about where this NHI might come from in his Ultra-Terrestrials paper.
Ultra-terrestrials, not just extraterrestrial.
Right. He pushes beyond the simple idea of aliens visiting from other planets. He lays out several hypotheses. Are they conventional extraterrestrials traveling interstellar or intergalactic distances? That's one possibility.
The standard sci-fi scenario.
Yes. But then he asks, could they be something else? Maybe what he calls Atlanteans, not literally from Atlantis, but representing an ancient, perhaps non-human intelligence that established hidden bases on Earth millennia ago.
Hidden here all along.
Maybe deep within the vast, unexplored oceans which cover most of our planet. Or perhaps beneath the polar ice caps or in remote mountain ranges, operating unseen, essentially coexisting with us.
Wow. Okay, what else?
A third possibility he considers, echoing Professor Michael Masters' ideas, is time travelers. Could these UAPs and their occupants be humans from our own distant future, returning to observe their past, maybe study critical historical junctures?
Us from the future.
It's a mind-bending idea, but one he considers scientifically plausible within certain theoretical frameworks. And remember Puthoff's background in remote viewing.
Yeah, the psychic perception stuff.
His remote viewing program, back when it was government-funded, apparently yielded insights into potential UFO-based locations. He specifically mentioned Mount Zeal in Australia as a possible site identified through remote viewing.
Did anything corroborate that?
Incredibly, Puthoff recounts a story where, years later, a former CIA station chief who had been based in Australia casually remarked to him about strange activity consistently reported around Mount Zeal. An eerie, independent corroboration of data obtained through unconventional means.
That's spooky.
It definitely blurs the lines. It broadens the scope of possibilities for NHI immensely, forcing us to consider origins far more complex and perhaps closer to home or time than just aliens from Alpha Centauri.
But you said there was an even more provocative theory.
Yes, perhaps the most profound and challenging one, mentioned by both Puthoff and also echoed by Ryan Graves based on pilot testimony. The idea that these might be interdimensional beings.
Interdimensional, like from another reality or dimension coexisting with ours.
Exactly. Based on witness testimony from, as Puthoff puts it, very credible people, rational individuals, often military or intelligence personnel with no history of fabrication, these entities might operate outside of time and space as we conventionally understand it.
What does that even mean, outside time and space?
It suggests they aren't bound by the linear progression of time or the three spatial dimensions that define our reality. They might be capable of movement outside of time and space, potentially explaining instantaneous travel, like the tic-tac jumping 60 miles, or their ability to appear and disappear seemingly at will.
That fundamentally changes, well, everything.
It shatters our scientific, philosophical, and societal frameworks. If true, it doesn't just mean aliens exist. It implies that reality itself is far more complex, far more layered than our familiar 3D plus time continuum. It suggests other dimensions or realities aren't just mathematical constructs in string theory, they might be tangibly interacting with our own world.
Mind blown. Okay, let's try to consolidate. Based on all these accounts, Lazar, Fravor, Graves, historical cases, the scientific speculation, what are the key capabilities consistently attributed to these UAPs?
All right, let's list them out. It's a truly extraordinary list that consistently defies known physics and engineering. First, extreme speed and maneuverability. We talked about Fravors Tic-Tac dropping 80,000 feet in under a second, making instantaneous turns that should generate thousands of Gs. No sonic booms reported usually either, despite speeds calculated sometimes in the tens of thousands of miles per hour.
Implying inertia negation or space-time manipulation?
Precisely. Second, stationary flight. Graves objects holding perfectly still against 140-mile-per-hour winds at altitude. No visible propulsion, no sound, no effort against the elements, just hanging there.
An engineering impossibility for us.
Completely. Third, transmedium travel. This is a big one. The consistent theory, supported by numerous reports, is that these are transmedium craft. They can seamlessly transition between Earth's atmosphere and water.
Flying into the ocean.
Yes, and reportedly traveling at incredible speeds. Underwater figures like 500 knots, around 575 miles per hour, have been mentioned. For comparison, our fastest nuclear submarines top out around maybe 30-40 knots submerged. This implies they might create some kind of bubble around themselves, maybe using that gravity tech to negate water resistance.
Like an underwater warp bubble.
Something like that. Fourth, gravity propulsion. This brings us back to Lazar. His claim that element 115 fuels a system that generates gravity waves and warp spacetime. This provides a potential theoretical framework for the observed instantaneous acceleration, the lack of g-forces, maybe even the transmedium capability. It aligns disturbingly well with Fravors' description of the Tic-Tac moving like a ping-pong ball in a glass of water, instant changes in direction and location.
The physics explanation is true.
Fifth, material science beyond ours, the alleged metamaterials. These are materials supposedly recovered from crash sites. Described as having highly engineered atomic layering, exhibiting strange properties like extreme strength-to-weight ratios, unusual isotopic ratios, or maybe even room temperature superconductivity.
Stuff we can't make.
Not yet. Puthoff believes we might understand the physics behind these field propulsion systems, theoretically, but our materials science, our ability to actually manufacture these exotic materials and harness the necessary fuel sources, like stable element 115, he thinks we're maybe 100 years behind.
A huge gap.
Finally, system jamming and anticipation. We saw this with the Tic-Tac apparently jamming sophisticated F-18 radar systems and the Eglin orb disabling both radar and FLIR. This points to advanced electronic warfare or electromagnetic interference capabilities, and that unsettling aspect of the Tic-Tac seeming to anticipate Fravors' rendezvous point, reappearing there almost instantly, that suggests a level of awareness, predictive capability, or maybe even influence over events that is deeply, deeply weird.
Taken together, it paints a picture of technology that is orders of magnitude beyond us.
Orders and orders of magnitude. Consistently reported by multiple credible sources across decades. It's a pattern that's becoming impossible to ignore.
Okay, so we have this mountain of evidence, these credible witnesses, this impossible technology, which leads us to maybe the most frustrating part of this whole story. The elephant in the room.
The secrecy.
The pervasive, multi-decade government secrecy. The active efforts, it seems, to cover up UAP information. It's woven through almost every account we've discussed.
Absolutely. This isn't just about classifying sensitive military tech. The pattern suggests something much deeper, a systemic, deeply entrenched approach to controlling this information, an approach that transcends administrations, political parties, even decades.
And we have whistleblowers confirming this now, right? Like David Grush.
Yes, David Grush. His testimony under oath to Congress last year was explosive, though perhaps not surprising to longtime followers of the topic. Grush is a former high-level intelligence officer, a combat veteran, worked at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, served on the Pentagon's UAP task force.
Impeccable credentials.
Absolutely. And he alleged under oath the existence of a multi-decade covert government program focused on the retrieval and reverse engineering of non-human craft and biological entities.
Biological entities, not just craft.
That was his claim. Non-human biologics recovered alongside the craft. He alleged this program operates with extreme secrecy, hidden within layers of compartmentalization, often completely beyond legal congressional oversight.
How long has this been going on, according to Grush?
He claims the U.S. government, or elements within it, have likely known about non-human intelligence since at least the 1930s.
1930s?
Yeah.
Wow.
He also hinted at the involvement of private defense contractors using the term metal benders, perhaps colloquially, in the retrieval operations, working outside traditional military chains of command, creating a massive accountability vacuum.
And he mentioned harm coming to people involved.
He did. Shockingly, he alleged that some colleagues had sustained physical injuries, some directly inflicted by UAPs during retrieval or interaction attempts, and others, he claimed, were harmed or even killed by human elements within the government trying to silence them or maintain the secrecy.
That's a terrifying accusation. Direct illegal action to maintain the cover-up.
It implies a shadow operation willing to go to extreme, unlawful lengths to protect these secrets. And remember, he made these claims under oath, facing severe penalties for perjury if he's lying.
And this secrecy extends even to elected officials trying to investigate.
We saw that with the Eglin Air Force Base incident. Congressmen Matt Gaetz and Tim Burchett, despite their positions on relevant committees, were initially stonewalled, denied full access to the information and the flight crew.
By whom? The military, intelligence agencies.
It's often unclear who holds the ultimate authority within these deeply buried programs. Burchett explicitly notes that even very high-ranking officials with top security clearances, Title 10 military commanders, Title 50 intelligence directors, are routinely denied access to these specific UAP-related Special Access Programs, or SAPs.
SAPs being the most highly classified projects.
Exactly. Programs so secret that access is granted only on an extremely strict, compartmentalized, need-to-know basis, even within the highest levels of government. Burchett openly suspects these UAP SAPs are funded off the books, maybe using the billions of dollars the Pentagon reportedly fails to account for in its audits each year.
A black budget operation.
Effectively operating as a black budget, completely outside democratic accountability and oversight. This isn't just a lack of transparency, it's an active, deliberate obstruction of Congress by unelected officials guarding potentially world-changing secrets.
And this culture of secrecy filters down, creating the stigma Ryan Graves talked about.
Precisely. Graves stated very clearly that the stigma within the flight community directly leads pilots to not report UAPs. They fear losing their careers, their clearances, being ridiculed.
The best thing they can do is keep silent.
That was his assessment of the prevailing culture. This creates that dangerous blind spot we discussed, compromising national security by leaving leadership uninformed about potential threats or advanced technologies operating freely in protected airspace. Commander Fravor echoed this, noting the military's historical tendency to just ignore it if they don't understand it or if it doesn't fit their models.
A systemic failure driven by secrecy and stigma.
When combined, this internal stigma and official policy of denial or dismissal fosters a culture of ignorance and suppression at multiple levels. It means we aren't even accurately assessing what's happening in our own skies, let alone understanding it.
What are the broader consequences of all this secrecy?
Well, first, it cultivates deep public distrust. Decades of official denial, ridicule, and obfuscation make it incredibly difficult for people to distinguish fact from fiction, genuine witnesses from hoaxers, credible research from deliberate disinformation.
You don't know who or what to believe.
Exactly. Second, it fundamentally hinders scientific progress. Serious researchers like Jacques Vallée lament that the government's narrow focus on recent, often ambiguous military sightings neglects the rich historical data cases with landings, physical traces, biological elements that could provide much deeper insights if studied openly.
We're potentially ignoring crucial data.
We probably are. And third, it creates this exhausting cycle for the public, as Joe Rogan put it, oscillating between excitement when new information emerges and then feeling duped all the time when it leads to more questions, more secrecy, or apparent debunking. It prevents genuine public understanding and engagement.
And the ultimate consequence.
Yeah. The ultimate consequence, and perhaps the most chilling one, is the potential existence of powerful, unelected individuals operating hugely funded programs dealing with potentially world-changing technology and information about non-human intelligence, and maybe even human origins entirely outside of any democratic accountability or public scrutiny.
A shadow government almost, dealing with the biggest secrets imaginable.
That's the implication. However, Hal Puthoff offered a slightly more optimistic note. He sees a potential shift happening now. He referred to upcoming documentaries and books, supposedly coming from Maximum insiders.
People deep within these programs.
That's the suggestion. He called it disclosure on steroids, hinting that maybe, finally, after decades of rigid control, the dam of secrecy is starting to crack. Perhaps ushering in a new era of revelations that could profoundly reshape our world.
We can hope. But speaking of secrets, there was one more mind-bending detail from Lazar, wasn't there? Something Bigelow mentioned.
Ah, yes. The holographic book. If the secrecy wasn't enough, Robert Bigelow recalled Bob Lazar describing something he allegedly saw while working at S4, a kind of holographic book retrieved from one of the alien craft.
A book made of light.
Apparently. And Lazar claimed this book detailed the history and origins of human beings.
What did it say?
According to Lazar, as recounted by Bigelow, the book indicated that human beings are the product of accelerated evolution, resulting from planned genetic manipulation or experiments conducted on early primates by visiting non-human species.
We were engineered or guided.
Genetically corrected or containerized were terms allegedly used, implying multiple interventions over history. Talk about changing everything we thought we knew, not just about the universe, but about ourselves, our biology, our history, our religions, our entire sense of place in the cosmos.
That's the ultimate secret, isn't it? If true.
Potentially the biggest secret imaginable, hidden away from humanity for millennia. Its implications for every aspect of human understanding, scientific, philosophical, spiritual, or just absolutely staggering to contemplate. So, where does this leave us? After diving deep into Lazar's claims, Fravors and Graves encounters, the historical cases, the science, the secrecy, what does it all mean for us standing here now?
It feels like we're on the edge of something huge.
It does. This deep dive took us on an extraordinary journey, didn't it? From the highly controversial claims of Bob Lazar, hinting at physics way beyond our grasp, with element 115 and gravity drives,
to the absolutely undeniable real-time encounters of decorated Navy pilots like Commander David Fravor and Ryan Graves facing objects that simply shouldn't exist.
We touched on global encounters, like the schoolchildren in Zimbabwe receiving telepathic warnings about our planet's future. We explored the baffling scientific anomalies of UAP performance, impossible speeds, transmedium travel, stationary hovering, jamming advanced sensors.
And underpinning it all, that pervasive, decades-long government secrecy, shielding this reality not just from the public, but even from elected officials trying to get answers.
The sheer consistency of these stories, coming from disparate witnesses across different eras and locations, the unimpeachable credibility of so many of these witnesses, especially the military and intelligence personnel, and the sheer impossibility of the observed phenomena according to our current science.
It forces you to ask that profound, maybe uncomfortable question, doesn't it?
It does. What if they, whoever or whatever they are, aren't just out there in some distant galaxy we might reach someday? What if they've been here all along, observing us, interacting with us, perhaps even subtly shaping our history in ways we're only beginning to guess at?
What if the technology Lazar described, the movements Fravor and Graves saw, the messages the children received? What if it all truly points to a non-human intelligence operating by rules that defy our current understanding of physics, material science, maybe even biology, and the nature of consciousness itself?
And if our governments, or parts of them, have indeed been recovering and reverse engineering non-human craft, maybe even biological entities, for decades, operating with such extreme secrecy that Congress itself is kept in the dark.
What other fundamental truths about our existence, about reality, have been hidden in plain sight all this time?
And maybe the biggest question for all of us as a species, how will we truly react when or if these truths are fully revealed? When the veil is finally lifted on a reality that might be far stranger, far more complex, and far more profound than we ever dared to imagine.
That's the ultimate question to ponder.
M5D UFO Files is real-life mysteries discussed by those who dare to question. The truth is out there, and we seek it.
Don't forget to like, share, and join the Truth Seekers only on M5D. Subscribe now and definitely let us know what stands out to you in these incredible accounts. What questions do they ignite in your mind? Until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and question everything.
M5D UFO Files. Unraveling the UFO Files. Revelations that change everything.